or in your household have got an electric drill? Do you want to put your hands up? What? Oh, what? That's about 80%, I think. That's higher than the UK average, which is about 50%. What about, who's got a lawnmower in their household? Right, I do know what you do with a lawnmower. I'm not sure what you do with a power drill, but... and who's got a car? Wow, so those are high percentages. I think, maybe 80%, 60%, about 50% for cars. A power drill, in its lifetime, gets used for a total of 13 minutes on average. So maybe it's kind of all right that I don't know what you do with a power drill. A lawnmower does a little bit better. It gets used for 4 hours a year. Mine gets used a lot less than that. My neighbours will tell you. And a car does a lot better. It gets used 2 hours a day. But that's still 22 hours a day that you're paying to have a car sitting idle outside your house. Some other things that maybe I kind of think that those are things that we could consider sharing. Maybe making use of the objects that people have got nearby, our neighbours maybe. And we start to see that happening with car clubs. And I live in a sort of a neighbourhood where I can go and knock on my neighbour's door and ask them, can I borrow your power drill? And I was going to say most of them would probably trust me to use that. Maybe they wouldn't actually, because they probably know I'm not very good at using a power drill. Some things that may be a little bit more difficult to share. What about a washing machine? So we don't use a washing machine very often, do we? I mean, 2 washes a week for most households? So 3-4 hours? What about a guest room? That room at the back of the house, upstairs, full of junk. And when people come to stay those 5 or 6 days a year, you have to go in and sort of do a super clean and get all the dust out. So sharing those would require quite a degree of trust in the relationships you've got. And there's also needs some form of mechanism for doing that exchange of those objects or that back bedroom for having guests come visit. But if you could do that, what does a guest bedroom cost in your house? Or maybe you bought a 3-bedroomed house instead of a 2-bedroom house. So maybe you spent, 25, 30, 35,000 pounds extra on your house. So you're paying maybe a mortgage of £100 a month extra for something you're going to use 5 or 6 days a year. So you could be working a lot less, earning a lot less, or you could be working the same and you have a high disposable income. You could go out quite a few times for £100 a month. What about shopping? So sharing, not sharing things, but sharing tasks. What about if you kind of pooled with your neighbours and one person got to go off shopping once a week and sort of brought it back for all your neighbours? And maybe they cooked that shopping for you and you all got together and you ate communally. So you came home, maybe at 7 o'clock from work, you popped into one of your neighbours, had a quick meal for 15 minutes, had a bit of a chat and then went home, and then you got to spend the rest of the evening chatting to your wife, your husband, your kids, while your neighbour washed up. Now, last month, I moved into a new community with 57 other adults and 15 kids. It's a bit like a holiday camp, a bit like Butlins. I've got my own house. I've got my own bedroom. I've got my own living room, kitchen, and bathroom. But it's using a sort of a design concept called cohousing. And cohousing, the way I kind of explain it to my mother, is it's a bit like a cul-de-sac. And you rip up the tarmac where everybody drives their cars and you put grass there. And the kids get to play around in the grass. And the cars are kept off the edge of the site, so the kids are safe. And they're sort of hidden discreetly behind some trees. And instead of putting your garden furniture in the back garden, you put some of it in the front garden. So you might put like a picnic bench or a barbecue. And maybe when you're sitting there, you get to look after the kids or look at the other kids playing, or maybe some other kids come up and talk to you. So you have some interactions with people. And maybe some of the neighbours come down and sit, have a chat for 5 minutes or 10 minutes on their way home for work after they park their car at the sort of the garage at the end of the street and they're walking past your house to their house. And then what about if you put a sort of a village hall in the middle of that cul-de-sac, in the middle of the grass. And in that village hall, you put a sort of a kitchen that everybody can use, and a dining room where everybody could eat together, and maybe a sofa space where people could hang out. And maybe you could use the whole place for your party that you want sort of once a year. When you've got this big house that you've paid for those twice-a-year parties, you can have a smaller house, a smaller mortgage, a smaller job, and you get to use this big space with people you could maybe sort of book out with all your neighbours as well. So you've got a big crowd of friends to invite. And maybe there you can put your guest room. So when your mum and dad come to stay, and it's all a bit tetchy, a little bit difficult having them in the house, well, you could put them in the guest room, and then you get to see them a couple of times during the day or across the weekends, but they're independent and they're not kind of on top of you. And when you want to escape, you can go back to your own house. And when they want to escape from you, they can go to the guest room. And you can put your washing machines in there. So we've got 2 washing machines shared between 41 households. So far, I've never had to queue for the washing machine. It doesn't actually get used that much. And that means I'm saving a lot of money on the things that I'm buying, like washing machines, power drills, cars. We share our cars. We've got 13 cars between the 41 households. But I've also got a smaller house, so I have got a smaller mortgage, so I do work a lot less. So what's my life been like since I've moved into co-housing? Well, I've been doing a lot of sharing. I've shared books with people. I've gone and borrowed bleach from somebody that would never have sort of bought a whole bottle for myself. I've shared a bed. So my dad did come to stay and wanted to stay in my house because he was a bit shy. So I went and borrowed a bed from one of the neighbours and stuck it in my back room next to my desk. I've borrowed clothes horse off neighbours when I've done sort of 3 washes in one go and didn't have enough place to sort of hang it all out. I've cooked twice now in sort of 5 weeks, and I've cooked for 30 to 40 people. And I've done maybe 2 meals on my own at home, and all the other evenings I've gone into the common house with our little village hall, and somebody else has cooked for me, and they've done all the washing up, and they've done all the shopping. And a Danish study suggests that if you live in this sort of format, then you gain 90 minutes per day through all the time savings you make as you collaborate with your neighbours. So I am finding it a bit strange that I get to go home maybe at 8. I've got nothing to do. I've got all this time available that's opening up for me, so I can do things that are much more interesting than shopping, cooking, and cleaning up. When I moved, I had a lot of help from my neighbours. There was kind of like, I just had a truck parked at the top of the street, and then there's this stream of people just moving between my house and the truck as they filled my new house up with all my old stuff. BT was a bit slow at getting my landline in, so I've been using the phone of one of my neighbours. And I go and sit in the common house, and that's just close enough to her house that I can pick up my broadband, so I can go on the internet and download my emails. When people have cooked a bit too much, which seems to happen most evenings, then there's a whole pile of leftovers. So if I get home from work at 10, I can go into the common house and I can pick up a sort of a doggy bag, either eat it there with the people who are still hanging out having a beer, or maybe I'll take it home if I want to be a bit faster and get to bed. Or I might pick up a doggy bag and take it into work the next day. And instead of paying £3.50 for a lunch at work, I put £1 into what we call the magic hat as my contribution, and I've got something much more healthy and probably a lot tastier to eat. I've shared lifts with people into town. And I've read to kids that aren't my own. Kids seem to become very confident in this environment. And I've got, I sit down on a sofa and almost instantaneously there's a kid on my lap saying, "Will you read me this?" And then there's 2 or 3 kids sitting around me. And it's really nice to see the kids, both indoors and outdoors, running around. And I never know who's looking after them, but I always know somebody is looking after them. So parents get a lot of sort of free time liberated for them. I've learned how to cook my favourite vegetable in a different way that saves me a hell of a lot of time and is a lot easier. So I'm learning skills. I'm learning knowledge. I used to think the supermarket deliveries were really evil, that they increased all this traffic. I've actually discovered that no, it's good for the environment. It reduces sort of car journeys. I've watched people change their practices. A lot of us are cyclists, and that's kind of normal in our community. And so I've seen a lot of the car drivers now buying bikes, asking us for sort of information about what's the best bike to buy, what's the best bike gear to buy. And so they're managing to cycle in the rain dry and realising that that's okay. It was like having bad jackets and trousers that was the problem in the past. And I've seen people change values as well. So one of my neighbours recently went on a work trip to Brussels, and she went down from Lancaster to London on the train, took the Eurostar then from St Pancras over to Brussels, and she forced one of her colleagues to do that as well. And what was interesting about that was she was sort of quite, I think, proud, I hope she doesn't mind me saying that, to say that a year ago, the issue that flying was bad for the environment was just not on her radar. And so she's changed. So we're learning from each other in lots of different ways, and we're changing how we approach our lives. And then fun, I guess, is on tap. If I ever want to talk to somebody, I just have to pretend I want to go and collect my post down in the common house, and I'll pass 3 or 4 people, and I'll choose somebody I want to talk to. The first day I lived there, it took me 2 hours to walk from my house to the end of the street, which is 7 houses, to get past everybody. I'm getting a lot better at that, about not engaging in every conversation that's available. I don't need a TV. I think I'm now living in my own soap opera. And it's exciting, and it's fun, and it's very, very real. And there's a lot of mutual support around, because through all these small interactions, having a housing estate that is designed to support spontaneous interaction rather than maximise the privacy, then I'm getting to know people, and I'm building relationships, and I'm building trust. And I'm beginning to feel that, yeah, when things are not so great, I've got somebody to go to. I was quite impressed last week. I came down with an infection that sort of is affecting everybody in Lancaster. And within about 4 hours, one of my neighbours had noticed that my daily pattern was different, and came and rang on my doorbell and asked me if I was okay, and asked me if there was anything I needed from the shops. Now, I call this my pension plan. So I hope that when I'm in my 80s or 90s or 100s, it will be just as effective that when I'm in need of a bit of assistance, that one of my neighbours will come and ring on my door and ask me what it is that I want. So I'm not investing in financial means, I'm investing in social capital to see me through and improve the quality of life that I'll have in my later years. So I'm looking at my well-being and my quality of life. Most people don't go into care homes because they're ill. They go into care homes because they can't complete very, very simple tasks that would just need the intervention of somebody for 1 or 2 minutes a day. So we were 5 friends who sort of came up with the idea of building a co-housing project in Lancaster. So an £8 million project. So quite a tall order, and maybe if we thought it was going to be that big to build 41 houses, we wouldn't necessarily set off to do it. There's about 1,000 co-housing projects in Denmark, where it was initiated about 40 years ago. It's about 200 in North America. There's countless, maybe thousands in the Netherlands, and a few hundred in Scandinavia. And we just sort of, I suppose, sat down in a pub, talked about this idea, got drunk, and one of us remembered the idea the next morning and decided that we were going to implement it. But what if you did something similar? You could go and talk to a developer, somebody who builds a normal housing estate, and say, hey, I've got a pile of people, and we'd like you to build something different, and we'll guarantee you some sales. We'll buy these houses off you. We'll buy these houses off you before you've built them. Could go and talk to a housing association. Hanover Housing Association in London is involved in several of these projects at the moment. Talk to them about them developing a sort of a neighbourhood for you along the way that you would like it to be built, rather than the way that commercial developers tell you you want to live. Or like us, you become your own developer, and rather than using the profit to go into some shareholder pot, then we use the money to invest in the environmental features of our house. So we're the biggest passive house development in the UK. I've only got 1 radiator in my house. My heating bills are expected to be £25 a year in a cold winter, and I haven't yet put the heating on in the house. It's so well insulated. When I have a bath, the temperature of the house goes up by about 1 degree. So that's what we did with the money, rather than it going to Barrett's or Persimmon, whoever. Or you could go and buy, that sounds like too much, you could go and buy a house in an existing community. So there's about 15 of these communities already established in the UK. And there's regularly houses coming up for sale in them. We've got 2 or 3 for sale at the moment in Lancaster. So first step, I would say go and read a book. There's plenty of books on cohousing, how to do it, what it looks like, books with loads of photographs, and books with stories of people who live in cohousing around the world. You could go and do a course. There's 1- and 2-day courses available in the UK, or attend one of the conferences. There's a big annual conference in the US, and in the UK there's normally sort of a conference once every 2 years on cohousing. You could look on the internet. You could look at the UK Cohousing Network site that tells you about cohousing in the UK and about how to do it, or you could look at the US website as well. Or you could just put a bench in your front garden. And when a neighbour comes home from work, they'll see you there and they might say hello. And maybe they'll come over to chat after a few months as well. And maybe you could offer them a beer at some point. And you could knock down your front wall. And then the kids, when they knock the ball over into your garden, they'll feel much more safe about coming in and getting it. And maybe they'll start, when you're not there, start using that space. And maybe you could re-adopt your streets. There's lots of grants available from councils where you can rip up the tarmac in front of you, if you're in a dead-end street, and lay grass down. And maybe you wouldn't do that for the whole street, but you could do it for like 2, 3, 4, 5 car parking spaces, and then the kids all get to play somewhere together. And maybe you could knock down the walls in your back gardens. And maybe you could club together and buy one of the houses when somebody moves out and turn that into a common house. And maybe you could start sticking your parents in the upstairs back bedroom of that house and start doing something more interesting with your own back bedroom. And you could potentially start eating together on some occasions, or just having street parties, or just having a Christmas party, Halloween, and bonfire night party. So what I suggest to you is that although going and living with 57 adults like I'm doing might be a tall order, lots of people are doing it around the world. It is fabulous, and you can do something on a much smaller scale. For me, there's absolutely kind of no housing like co-housing, to use a cliche. And I would say it's a sort of a new tradition in a way of living together. Thanks.